Welcome everyone to our Town of Amherstburg Community Engagement Session for the Windsor-Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Welcome to you all, and thank you really very much for being here. We're going to get started really almost right away with this evening's activities. If I can have the first slide, please. We begin as is our tradition with an appropriate recognition of the lands that we're operating on, albeit digitally. Nevertheless, today we're meeting in the tradition of the Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. And we respect the longstanding relationships with First Nations people in this place in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits des Detroits of Detroit. If I could have the next slide. We have a very brief video that provides welcome from a number of the leaders of the project. We'll play that video and you'll hear from them, and then we'll carry on in just a moment.
Hello. On behalf of all of us at the Windsor-Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Systems Leadership Table, we want to thank you for your interest in the development of our region's first ever Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Together, our goal is to build a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, has access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met across the region.
We want to hear from you. We want to understand what your priorities and concerns are for the safety and well-being of our community, so that we can create a plan to advance the interests of all residents across Windsor and the County of Essex. So please make your voice heard by participating in our online survey,
or by registering for one of the virtual public meetings happening in each of the region's 8 municipalities. To get involved, visit us online at CSWBWindsorEssex.ca. And thank you from all of us.
If I could have the next slide, please. There's just a few housekeeping matters we should just discuss. I know we're the better part of a year into having to deal with meetings of this kind, but it's always good just to remind ourselves of the way the platform works. Don't forget to always mute yourself unless you're speaking, and you know how to do that by now, I suspect, either using the mute button on your phone or the mute function that's at the bottom left of your screen. The hosts may be required to mute you if we experience continued background noise. And we know that that's sometimes a favor. If you've got a crisis going on in the kitchen, you probably don't want anyone else to know about it. But of course, please unmute yourself when you'd like to speak, because obviously we're predominantly here tonight to hear from you. So just make sure that you're comfortable working with the functioning of the mute and the unmute button, and we'll be able to hear the important and valuable contributions that you have to make. When it comes time to posing questions and comments, you've got two options. You can either use the chat box, and allows you to type something in, or there's the raise hand feature under the participants option. Just wait to be called on and we'll get to you. And I'm here with a couple of colleagues who will help me monitor those various streams, and we'll just make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. Now, it's important to bear in mind that this is all about community safety, so our team will be monitoring the discussion, and we reserve the right to delete any comments and or remove any participants who are making inappropriate comments, because safety starts here and now, and so our goal is to create an environment where everyone is comfortable participating. We have the services of closed captioning, and so if you do require live closed captioning for the meeting, please, you can enable that by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any technical issues, then by all means, Lindsay Rive here is the person who's managing everything from a technical perspective for it. So you can just send a quick chat message to her, or just let yourself be known to us that you're having issues, and we'll get you and her connected and figure out how to fix the problem. There's just one other thing I should mention. This is being recorded, and while it's certainly one of the great things about the platform is that we do get to see you if you leave your camera on. If you're in any way uncomfortable with that, then by all means, feel free not to. But what's important is that you do what works best for you. But obviously, we're very happy to see you if that seems appropriate. So if I could have the next slide. Just a quick take on the agenda. And if it seems like I'm trying to move through this really quickly, well, I am, because what we really want to hear from is you. But as you can see from the agenda, we're going to have a quick overview of the process from some of the folks that are leading the project. And then as quickly as we can, after a quick Q&A about the process as a whole, we're going to move into breakout sessions. We don't have a huge number of folks tonight, but we are going to want to break into smaller groups just to make sure that we're in nice, comfortable sizes of groups to be able to communicate. And so it should be a very, use the word comfortable a couple of times. It should be a really pleasant kind of experience, because we're not going to have to be particularly formal recognizing each other. It should feel a lot like a dinner table conversation, I suppose. When we're done the breakout sessions, as is often the case, we'll do a report back and a group discussion so that everyone has the benefit of hearing the ideas that have been shared from others. And if I can just have the one last introductory slide before we get into some of the more substantive matters, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is John Matheson. Do not let the out-of-date photograph fool you. This is just a demonstration of my full compliance with all the rules that keep you from going to get your hair cut. But I'm the engagement leader for Strategy Corp working on this tonight. I'm joined by my colleague Olivia LaHaye, and then there's some folks here from the team as well from Windsor-Essex. We've got Leo Gill, who's the project manager. We've got Stephen Lynn, I think, tonight, who's the manager of social policy and planning. We've got Michelle Sushu, who is from Workforce Windsor-Essex, and Lindsay Rive, who I already introduced to you as the person who has her fingers on all of the technology for us. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you, please, Leo Gill, who is the project manager. He's been working on this intensely for over a year now, and has really poured heart and soul into trying to make sure that this is a success for Windsor-Essex. So over to you, Leo.
Thank you very much, John, for that great introduction. I do appreciate it. So thank you all for joining us today. I want to start off by asking the question that may be on your minds. What is community safety and well-being planning? And really, community safety and well-being planning is truly about creating a collaborative approach to service delivery. So one that's really involving multiple sectors and community partners, and is focused on being proactive and preventative. All of this for the goal of addressing local priorities related to crime and complex social issues. And to do this, municipal and regional leaders are working together with partners across several different fields with the goal of creating a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, has access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met. What I find is really important about these goals and about the approach itself is that it recognizes that there are factors that influence our feelings of safety and well-being that really are beyond just whether a crime has occurred. They can be things like stigma, discrimination, even a lack of access to resources. And the approach also recognizes that for every risk that there may be in a community, there are also great community strengths and assets, and we should be using that as our starting blocks, using those strengths as a way to begin building upon. And finally, really that everyone has a role to play in improving our safety and well-being across Windsor and Essex County and across your municipality as well, across Amherstburg. And so I think the next piece that comes to mind is, why are we doing this project? Why now? And really we are undertaking this project now because over the past 2 decades, provincial data and research focusing on how to address some of today's really complicated social issues have highlighted the importance of things like prevention, of crime prevention, strengthening communities, and involving different sectors in coming up with those solutions to deal with some of the challenges we may be facing in our communities. And based on this research, in 2018, the provincial government actually passed legislation that required all municipalities to prepare and adopt a CSWB plan. But beyond the fact that it's legislated, there's a lot of great benefits from a local context that I'll be discussing shortly. Next slide, please. And something for us to just kind of wrap our heads around a little bit about this approach is that we've actually are fortunate to have a framework, a planning framework to use. In this planning framework, for those who may not be able to see the image, anyone's on the phone, essentially there are 4 concentric circles. In the center of that is incident response, the red bullseye there. The next layer above that is risk intervention. The layer beyond that is prevention, and the top layer is social development. When we commonly when we think of safety interventions, we tend to focus on the bullseye at the incident itself, that red middle, and tend to approach it from a policing or emergency services perspective. But really, research is showing that first responders are actually being called to situations related to well-being that are symptoms of larger issues, things like a mental health crisis or housing insecurity. And these are issues that first responders can't solve alone. When we look at the second layer, that risk intervention layer, that really is focusing on reducing harm before it gets to the point of an incident. And this type of work is really not usually about creating community-wide strategies, and instead is focused on providing wraparound services to particular individuals in need. The next layer, prevention, is actually more aligned with what we're here to talk about today, and that's proactively identifying and addressing local risks before they escalate. And really, all community members, groups, and sectors have a role to play at this level. And then finally, at the very top, social development. This layer usually involves longer-term investments and strategies to improve larger-scale issues like access to income, education, and quality housing, to name a few. Work in this layer involves us looking beyond the incident at the social causes and understanding that those causes need integrated and collective responses. If we pull all of these concepts together, if instead of focusing and starting at the incident, at that red layer, we start at the top, at the social development layer, then we can really start working to build on protective factors and strengths, emphasize prevention and risk mitigation strategies through the use of data, and ultimately reduce the number of incidents we need to respond to by intervening before challenges become crises. Next slide, please. And really, to do that, there's a number of different ways that we could do that, but one approach that we are taking in our area is really one that is a joint city and county approach. And this is really what we're doing is, while this plan is being developed through regional collaboration, we're collaborating across each municipality and across the sectors that support the municipalities. The plan is going to include specific appendices and data profiles for each municipality. And the intent here is to ensure that the local priorities within each of our communities and each of our towns are identified. Guiding the plan development are two different teams here: the regional CSWB systems leadership table and also the enhanced sector network. And that leadership table is made up of leaders from across those different fields, from those different sectors like health and mental health, education, or community and social services. While the enhanced sector network consists of frontline staff and members from community organizations and committees that work alongside 8 historically underrepresented communities. And these communities include First Nations and Indigenous peoples, racialized persons, newcomers, youth, seniors, 2S LGBTQ+ folk, accessibility communities, and then broader community groups. And overall, they're helping us really kind of reduce and narrow down the scope of this type of a project with the objective of identifying priority risk factors, identifying strategies to reduce those risk factors, and then set measurable outcomes to make sure that we know how we're doing in terms of progress. Next slide, please. So overall, these CSWB plans, and our plan in particular, is really aiming to take advantage of the community's existing strengths, resources, and best practices, and trying to create proactive approaches to address identified local risks. Overall, these plans in general really benefit on a number of different ways, but they tend to benefit by enhancing communication and collaboration across different sectors, really increasing our understanding of some of the local risks and priorities and how to support vulnerable populations or historically underrepresented ones, and ensuring that these services are provided to individuals with complex needs. And lastly, that we are having increased awareness, coordination, and access to some of the services for community members and vulnerable groups. Next slide. And just to let you know where we are in terms of this process, really due to COVID-19, there's a bit of a pause, as with many different things. So we did have a project pause for a brief period of time. And we relaunched in June 2020. And since that relaunch, we've been able to review the data across multiple different sectors and categories and create an interactive asset map that kind of showcases the different resources and assets that we have, not only in Windsor, but also across every single municipality. And that's going to be made public in the coming weeks for your review. We also completed presentations informing elected officials from each municipal council about our project and how we're moving forward. And through our enhanced sector network, we've actually been able to engage 96 frontline staff and representatives from existing committees and organizations. Again, all of their support is to help us with contextualizing some of that data so we compare that understanding of what those numbers are, the quantitative piece, with what those numbers mean to people, the qualitative piece. And they also will be involved in helping us prioritize some community risk factors for the end result of this plan. Once we've completed the public consultation and been able to analyze the data, we're going to be developing the report and submitting it to municipal and county councils for adoption and for approval. We expect that the plan will be fully completed and made public by the end of the year. Next slide. So if you have any questions, if you could please either raise your hand or send a message in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any of you.
No questions so far, Leo.
Well, that's great, because I think we can then move on to having more of a discussion. We'll move on with Olivia to discuss a little bit about that current state data report that I had been mentioning, and we'll go from there. So next slide. Perfect.
So as Leo mentioned, we did develop a current state data report. This is kind of, we helped build up municipal profiles that really offer a by the numbers approach, which is of course one aspect of how we create the plan, but it really is just taking data from a number of sources, including the municipalities in the region on their housing and family services data, police services, StatsCan, as well as a lot of other provincial indicators like EQAO for education, just to name a few. The purpose of generating this by the numbers current state report is to help us create a baseline to assess safety and well-being in our communities, and also help identify possible areas of future improvement. With all that data, we organized it into several categories that are seen on the screen: crime and victimization, education, financial security, mental health and substance abuse, physical health, housing and neighborhoods, and COVID-19, even though we kind of acknowledge that COVID-19 impacts all of these categories. But the reason we show all of them is to kind of get you guys starting to think about all the variety of factors that we're talking about here in this plan, not just incidences of crime, but also the underlying causes of legal behavior in general. Next slide, please. So with that said, we have created a municipal profile, a by the numbers approach. It's one viewpoint of the municipality. And part of the reason you're here is to help provide another one for us that adds a bit more context to these numbers. It's also worth noting that we use a lot of data like StatsCan, which, given the year and the nature of the census, is a little outdated at this point, right? We have the census coming up this year, but that is not available yet. So we're working with 2016 data. But the next slide, which we'll show now, does help us take a little snapshot of the municipality that we can start working with. Some of the things that jump out when comparing Amherstburg to its peers include that the town has less severe crime than the rest of the region. It has a higher median household income and much lower child poverty rates, even though that was trending upwards as of 2016, so something to keep an eye on. Educational attainment was in line with regional averages, but in terms of housing, residents of the town spend a smaller portion of their income on shelter costs, and more people owned their homes as opposed to renting than the regional average. In terms of how the town has shaped its strategic priorities to address community safety and well-being, this town strategic plan focuses primarily on attracting growth and economic development. So we've pulled out some of the notable strategies that are helping them support this goal, including attracting new residents and businesses, supporting and diversifying the agricultural industry, investing in new and existing cultural festivals and events, and investing in infrastructure to support growth and attraction to the town, such as parks and recreation, housing, and municipal services. So that's kind of Amherstburg in one slide. You can see on the other side there's a couple of statistics, population, land size, distribution of ages, but this is one of the by the numbers approaches that we have for Amherstburg. With that said, we'll go to the next slide. With that kind of overview of everything we've been doing and a bit of municipal perspective for Amherstburg, we want to break out into smaller groups so we can start going through some of the questions we have to guide the discussion. Everyone's been assigned to a group. We should be about 6 to 8 each. We have about 5 questions to get through. Some of them have a little overlap. So depending on how the conversation goes, we might combine some of them if we have lots to say. We're going to be in the rooms for 45 minutes. And each room will have a host from our team that will help make sure everyone is able to contribute, help guide the discussion, and make sure that we do actually get to all the questions so that we can hear as much of what you guys have to say as possible. So after the activity, after 45 minutes, we should get some warnings. We'll all get automatically pulled back into this main group, and we'll have a little bit of a regrouping session just to pull out some main themes that everyone was talking about and hear what the other groups were talking about. As a quick refresher, these will be small groups, so hopefully it's just open dialogue is able to happen. But if you are speaking, make sure you're unmuted. If you have a lot of noise in the background, it is better if you can mute yourself. But if you have, but you're also free to use the raise hand or chat functions as you please. So with that, Lindsay, I think we can get sent into those groups as soon as you're ready.
All right, I'll open the rooms now. Just hit the join room button and you should be good.